Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Gostola. I'm the managing editor for Shadowproof and also the curator and editor for the Dissenter newsletter, which I encourage you to subscribe to. You can go to the dissenter.org. If you go to the dissenter.org, you can follow stories on whistleblowers, press freedom issues, as well as follow the case of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, the case against him, which we'll be getting to some developments related to Assange on this broadcast today. Make sure you take a moment to hit subscribe if you are new to this channel. I'm a journalist who's been doing this work for some time, and I haven't done a lot with the channel over the last several months. I had been busy with publicity for my book, Guilty of Journalism, The Political Case Against Julian Assange, which is available from Censored Press and Seven Stories. You can get that book at, if you go to Project Censored's website, or you can go to sevenstories.com if that's of interest to you. But I had been doing some publicity, working on organizing a couple events that are coming this month in June. And now I have time to get back into doing this. So I don't want to waste a whole lot of time. Thank you for being here. It's the first day of June. Outside, it's 83 degrees here in Chicago, where I'm based. There's an air quality alert, which leads into where I'm going to begin here with this broadcast. So over here, the Associated Press, we have the science writer doing a story about how the Earth is really quite sick now and in a danger zone in nearly all ecological ways, the study says. And I'm going to read some of this because I think it's important to what we're going to discuss here today. This leads into the story about the bail fund organizers who were arrested in Georgia. The story is that the Earth has pushed past 7 out of 8 scientifically established safety limits and into the danger zone. And that's not just for an overheating planet that has lost its natural areas, but for the well-being of people who live on this planet. That's according to a study that has been done by an international scientist group called Earth Commission, and it was published in the Nature Journal. And this is a publication that covers climate, air pollution. The study looks at climate, air pollution, phosphorus and nitrogen contamination of water from fertilizer overuse, groundwater supplies, fresh surface water, the unbuilt natural environment, and the overall natural and human-built environment. Only air pollution wasn't quite at the danger point globally, but just give us some time. I think together as a species we'll be able to reach that 8th area and be in the danger zone, because you have Joe Biden approving oil and gas projects, a dream, just a dream. These are projects that would have had so much protest, so much clamor by climate groups if President Donald Trump was in office. And some of them are actually angry with Biden, have registered their discontent, but there's a limit to what they can do. He's going to be the nominee, or he says he's running for re-election of the Democratic Party, which means that they're effectively neutered. They're going to give him his vote. None of these groups ever challenge the Democratic Party's nominee because they're more afraid of the Republican than the Democrat. So these projects get to be approved for the profits, for the further enrichment of the fossil fuel industry. And they have, we've just saw the Supreme Court in the last year or so has been gutting the Clean Air Act. The Clean Water Act was recently gutted. And we continue to see things of this nature where these projects are approved. The Mountain Valley Pipeline is in the debt ceiling agreement that just passed the House. That was jammed in there by the coal baron himself, Joe Manchin of West Virginia. And there's nothing that anybody could really do about it because he basically acted the same way as many of the Republicans and put something in there for his funders, and that's how that got to be part of a debt ceiling deal, when a pipeline has nothing to do with the debt of the United States. That's in there. And even more dangerously, it may make it harder for people to go to court and challenge oil and gas projects. So just give us some time. As far as the United States' contribution to the destruction of planet Earth, we're going to get there. And so as a backdrop, you see that if I return here, 3 people were arrested for money laundering and charity fraud in Atlanta. I'm going to give the government side now because they need it. It's going to be repeated by local news affiliates in the Atlanta, Georgia area. It's already been broadcast by national news, but we need to establish what they were claiming about these individuals. Then we'll get into the repression of dissent that is happening at the core of all of this. So you see that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the state of Georgia has its own FBI, essentially. I can't say that exists here in the state of Illinois. I wasn't familiar that states had their own kind of police, secret police, so to speak, that could be sent out to go after people who protest. The same do what the FBI has historically done nationally in the United States, but Georgia has its own group of agents that can be deployed. They arrested 3 people on the charges stemming from an investigation they claim into individuals who are responsible for numerous criminal acts. And it's at the future site of the Atlantic Public Safety Training Center and other Metro Atlanta locations. The Public Safety Training Center, that's their name. What activists call it is CopCity. They are building this compound that will essentially be this fantasy land, fun house place for police officers to come and train and learn how to go around and suppress people who are engaged in demonstrations, basically engaged in the kind of activity we're seeing to try to stop this compound. They're going to be able to learn police tactics that have been debated and challenged by uprisings throughout the United States over the last decade. And you've got Marlon Scott Kotz, who's 39, of Atlanta, Georgia, Savannah D. Patterson, age 30, of Savannah, Georgia, and Adele McLean, age 42, of Atlanta, Georgia, who were charged with money laundering and charity fraud. All right, remember that. We'll get to that. But they executed a search warrant, and these people are being attacked, basically, for the fact that they supported people previously who have been arrested at demonstrations for stopping this CopCity, challenging the construction of this project. They have been helping people who have been accused with gross charges of domestic terrorism. And for that, now they find themselves facing their own prosecution, and they're effectively neutered. This Atlanta Solidarity Fund has to be careful about what it does, and another fund or another group is going to have to take its place, and then they will face the threat of this kind of repression from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And so here from the Atlanta Community Press Collective, we have what you see are the 3 organizers: APD, GBI, raid the bail fund. They arrest these 3 organizers, and I named them. The Atlanta police was in on this, working on it. They even came in SWAT gear because, of course, there has to be a show of force to further the level of intimidation and harassment that is meted out. I cribbed this, but let me go back first and just read some of what we get from the Atlanta Press Collective. The Community Press Collective has a rundown on this. And for those of you who don't know, this is important information. Just after 9 a.m. on May 31st, there were officers from the Atlanta Police Department and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation that raided the teardown house in East Atlanta. the police arrested 3 organizers with the Atlanta Solidarity Fund, a nonprofit that provides bail and legal support to protesters who are arrested. These were arrests that are part of the wave of repression that protesters have faced for opposing the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, more commonly known as CopCity. These people that I named, Marlon, Adele, Savannah, were booked at the DeKalb County Jail, charged with 1 count each of money laundering and charity fraud. A representative from the Solidarity Fund said McLean was taken to Grady Hospital for a pre-existing spinal condition before being transported to DeKalb County Jail. Arrests came a week after news that this project is going to cost $67 million. That's $30 million more than what has been claimed since 2021 when the project was proposed. Not to mention, this is being built in a nature preserve area, an area that is forested, the kind of deforestation that could be taking place as a result of this construction is going to deprive this part of the United States of a source of oxygen, and something that can help control to some degree the emissions that are being consistently put out by just the existence of human beings, the way we live, and then of course these oil and gas projects in different parts of the United States offshore that are continuing to be greenlit by the U.S. government. If these people are found guilty, this money laundering charge could result in a fine of $500,000, $500,000, up to 20 years imprisonment, or both. A charity fraud charge that carries a fine of $10,000, or the total amount of the fraudulent solicitations and criminal penalties of up to $5,000, a minimum of 1 year in jail with up to 5-year maximum, or both. So jail time and fines. And obviously the money laundering is like they're going after these protesters or these organizers like they're mobsters. This is what is being signaled by the state of Georgia. And Brian Kemp has done this by first labeling these people who are demonstrating as domestic terrorists, going in and suggesting that some of the behavior and actions that they engage in are uniquely terroristic. And then those people are arrested. They're locked up on domestic terrorism charges, highly political charges, because they're opposed to them. They're protecting the interests that are trying to build this piece of real estate that will destroy forested land. And then they're turning around now and saying that the people who support them are aiding and abetting domestic terrorists, and so they're engaged in money laundering. Or they, actually, it's probably stunning that they didn't go for it entirely and accuse them of material support for terrorism, because there are post 9/11 laws in some places in the US where you could probably get away with doing that. And Georgia seems like a dangerous place to be, where they could do that to the activists who are on the ground in Atlanta, consistently challenging this, trying to go to public meetings, register their discontent. So the executive director of the Civil Liberties Defense Center, Lauren Regan, said that this is an extreme provocation by the Atlanta Police Department and the state of Georgia. Bailing out protesters who exercise their constitutionally protected rights is simply not a crime. In fact, it's a historically grounded tradition in the very same social and political movements that the city of Atlanta prides itself on. Someone had to bail out civil rights activists in the 60s. I think we can all agree that community support isn't a crime. Kotz described this organization. This was prepared in case that they were arrested. So I suppose what we're seeing here is that they expected that this crackdown could intensify and ensnare them beyond just the people who were protesting. So they said that the Atlanta Solidarity Fund has existed for 7 years with the sole purpose of providing resources to protesters experiencing repression. We ensure their rights are respected through the criminal justice system, and we provide access to representation to assist them with navigating the legal system, which is all important. You get hit with charges after demonstrating, and it's scary. You don't know what is going to happen to you next. Is it true that you're actually in trouble? that you could be uh, in jail, that maybe you might lose your job because of what you've now been accused of doing. It makes you think twice about ever protesting and demonstrating again. But then, if someone can tell you that the police, that the government, that prosecutors are overreaching, that you're being targeted, that's powerful because you might be willing to fight back. You might be able to take on some attorney who is willing to represent you and help get those charges removed, especially if there's a chance that a judge or a jury could be convinced that it's entirely bogus and unsubstantiated. So, uh, these uh, Brian Kemp, of course, had to open his mouth and say something. He continues to insist that these people are outside agitators, and that is the same kind of language that has always been used about people who are engaged in protest. Everyone always says that it must be coming from some other neighborhood, some other community coming in, trying to destabilize and disrupt. That's how civil rights leaders were referred to in Atlanta in the 1960s. That's what the Atlanta Press Collective points out. So they had a press conference. They challenged this on May 31st. And Kamal Franklin has been part of challenging this. And, he said, of course, the charges are false charges intended to chill the movement, and that the historic use of bail funds are an integral part of protest movements. Um, so let me go forward here and highlight some of this background that needs to be understood about how this is alarming. This was in Slate. This is the details of the Atlanta bail fund arrest are more horrific than first described. That was written by Jocelyn Simonson, and Jocelyn wrote that this is a longstanding tactic of the repression of dissent to criminalize the collective care of activists, including through the payment of money bail. In the 1950s, for example, the federal government targeted a bail fund run by the Civil Rights Congress that supported people charged in politically motivated prosecutions, especially those accused of communism under the Second Red Scare. The Congress's president, writer Dashiell Hammett, served 5 months in a federal prison because he would not reveal the names of the funders of the bail fund. More recently, politicians across the political spectrum have surveilled and attacked community bail funds in the wake of 2020 uprisings against police violence, whether it was the repeated far-right attacks on the Minnesota Freedom Fund during the 2020 and 2022 national elections, or the 2020 investigation of the Massachusetts bail fund by then Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey, who is now the governor. Healey's investigation was later quietly closed without any findings of wrongdoing. In each instance, government officials took a routine criminal procedure, the posting of bail, and turned it into alleged criminal conduct because of the collective and therefore the political nature of the actions. So this is bipartisan. If I'm correct, Maura Healey is a Democrat. Let me just verify. I believe that she is. She's from the Democratic Party. So you have now somebody who runs the state of Massachusetts who has this history of going after a bail fund. You now have in Georgia a bunch of Republicans who are going after a bail fund. And so if the bail funds get in the way, if they can be seen to pose an obstacle, you're seeing that this is the tactic that will be used to make them ineffective, to suppress their ability to defend protesters. Let's continue here. I want to show a clip so people can see exactly what this is. You get a sense for some of the risk taking that is ongoing in Georgia. Here's some of the comments that people are bringing to these meetings and why they object to this CopCity. So here's a little montage that was put together.
Let me help you understand what the people of the cab will do to you, Andre Dickens. We will hit these streets and we will make sure that come re-election time, you come unasked that speech.
I think the supporters are the outside agitators. They're the corporate sponsors. It's Bank of America, Delta, Home Depot, and the other multi-billion-dollar corporations.
And these are excerpts from my journal 4 days after the violent police raid on the music festival on March 5th. I saw somebody being put in a chokehold, and I heard so many screams, including my own. This is what real terrorism looks like. And it wasn't done by forest defenders. It was done by state and local law enforcement and the politicians that carry the water for state-sponsored terrorism.
And I'm going to call it what it is. It's fascism. That's what you guys are a part of.
A training center which is explicitly supposed to help with police recruitment, with things like a high-speed chase course, with urban combat training. People who are attracted by that need an Xbox, not a firearm.
This is not just about money. CopCity is a project that embodies an alarming trend toward police militarization, where police forces are transformed into occupying forces rather than public servants.
As more dehumanizing bills continue to be passed in red states, it will be the cops arresting parents seeking health care for trans children. It will be the cops arresting women for pursuing their right to an abortion.
There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay.
Why in the hell are we up here at the Atlanta City Hall speaking about a militarized police training compound? You know why? Because it's a direct response from how we were in the streets in 2020, and we turned this state up like it never been turned up before.
We are appalled that charges have not been brought forth against those responsible for the murder of Tortuguita.
57 shots, nobody said anything on this entire platform. Some of us might go to jail for this, but some of y'all might go to hell for this.
Stop CopCity, justice for them all.
So there's a montage. It's very well put together. Those are some really good comments. It's badass to play Gil Scott Heron at a city meeting. Anybody who does that gets an A+ in my book. And I think I got that from that's from Lelusha Sigue. And so everyone, there's what's going on with CopCity, and this needs to be opposed. What's happening? If for some reason you're not interested in the project at all, you don't really care if a cop training center gets built in Atlanta, you could at least take a look at the way that terrorism law or terrorism is being invoked to stop people from demonstrating and stop people from organizing and to stop people from raising their discontent with city officials. The way that Democratic officials in Atlanta are benefiting from the authoritarianism of a right-wing governor in Governor Brian Kemp. That's definitely alarming.